Hey folks, welcome to Voices from L5. Today we got two guests from India talking about India's future in space and India's space industry. It's a really fantastic episode. If you guys enjoy it and you're looking forward to more Voices from L5, check out our new Facebook page. That's www.facebook.com/Voices from L5. We're also on Twitter, and if you guys want to support the show, check us out on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Voices from L5, or just to go to voicesfroml5.com. Don't forget to leave a nice comment on iTunes, vote us 5, or whatever you need to do to let everyone know that you like our show. Thanks.
The act of moving onward means we pass these signposts. One of them was first leaving Earth. The next one is hanging out on the moon. What's next? The planets. Onward to the edge. We're moving onward to the edge. Here we are together. This fragile little world. This fragile little world. Onward to the edge. We're moving onward to the edge. Here we are together. This fragile little world.
So you guys are at IIST, which is pretty special as far as universities go. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, in around 2007, Department of Space India actually planned to set up a college where they would train people who would eventually work at Indian Space Research Organization, and IST came up. It's been 9 years since then, and a lot of our alumni who have passed out of college have been working in ISRO. They've been part of various important missions. Say, for example, a lot of them were part of Mars orbital mission, and
Reusable launch vehicle.
and currently, and even in our college, we work on various projects which cater to space science and application. We have a sounding rocket project where we are working on designing a sounding rocket which would go up to an altitude of 70 to 80 kilometers and can be used to perform scientific experiments at that altitude. We have a nanosat project in our college where people are building a small satellite, and there are various other projects going on in the college, which all of them related to space science. So it's nice being in a place where you are surrounded by people, everyone being interested in space.
Right. I'll bet. Um, I think that a lot of people would agree. A lot of people would say that, space and space exploration really got its legs during the Cold War, where the US and the USSR were the big players. And these days, as we've sort of advanced in time and a lot of other countries have caught up, most people see the current, up and coming big players as India and China. Which leaves a lot of people, at least over here in America, wondering what India and China's goals are for space and what their ideas are going to be and what they're going to do in space. As two people, possibly at the, sort of at the ground level of this sort of thing, what do you guys see yourselves doing in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, it's very looking at how Indian Space Organization has approached space exploration or space science is pretty interesting. So let's have a look at what we have done in last 50 years. So has always focused on space applications. We have tried to use satellites to actually help people on ground with its remote sensing application, communications. We haven't been an organization, or ISRO haven't been an organization which has really focused on space exploration as such. But now it's been 50 years, and the focus is shifting. It's now we are coming to the picture where where we are planning to go beyond go beyond Earth. We have had the Chandrayaan mission in beginning of the century, and then we recently had the Mars orbital mission. We are working on like ISRO is currently last year ISRO tested a crew module, and the ISRO is working on GSLV Mark III, which would be able to carry a much larger weight payload mass than PSLV to a higher orbit. And also, there's a plan to develop a human rated launch vehicle. So yes, we are moving towards that, and also we have a lot of plans to send satellites on Mars, which would explore the planet and give us an idea of help us to prepare for Mars mission in future.
Hmm.
Uh, yes.
Hey, yeah, I think that the Mars mission was really the Mars orbiter was really the thing that put India on a lot of people's minds. You know, I mean, people who are really into space and space nerds already knew of India as this big up and coming player with so much satellite work you guys are doing and so much interesting stuff happening with your launch vehicles and especially the reusable work that we briefly mentioned earlier. But the orbiter was when I think the public really was like, wait, what? India's working on space stuff? That's incredible. Um, and I mean, in many ways, it is. I mean, the efforts coming out of the country are fantastic, and it really does sound like there's some exciting work in the future. Um, Given that we're a space settlement podcast, though, and we like to talk about that sort of thing, I want to hear what you guys think about what the Indian space community thinks about space settlement. Over here, it sort of flip flops depending on what year it is between what it's this big thing that we want to aim for and this sort of silly pie in the sky dream that's never going to happen. I'm wondering what the attitudes are over there in India regarding space settlement.
Space settlement is definitely the longer aim we all hope to achieve.
Hmm.
But right now, the whole focus is on developing technologies which would lead us there.
Right.
So currently, we are focusing on a lot of projects. Like ISRO is developing a human rated launch vehicle, which is still in plan at a very conceptual level, and there have been only few discussions about it. Its budget has not been allocated yet, but it will happen soon. We tested the care module, the crew module in last January successfully. Now there are reusable launch vehicle project going on where we aim at developing a single stage to orbit vehicle, which would help astronauts go to orbit and come back using a single stage rocket. And so there are a lot of projects going around in ISRO which are leading us to a future space settlement maybe. But I don't really see space settlement as a goal for say next 10 years
Hmm.
or 20 years. I'm not
Right.
sure about that. But yes, the whole focus is on developing technologies which would make that possibility in.
I think that's a very similar outlook as most other countries have. I mean, I'd say pretty much everyone agrees that space element isn't a very realistic thing in the short term. Um, but you know, even folks at NASA will sort of wobble their heads around a little bit and say that yeah, space settlement's going to be something that we look into at some point in the future. Let's hear a little bit about what you guys actually do in your day to day. What you mentioned a couple really interesting projects you guys have been involved in. Let's hear a little bit about those.
Yes, so the project I mentioned about first is Vyom. Vyom means sky. It's a Sanskrit word, and we are developing a sounding rocket which can go up to an altitude of 70 to 80 kilometers. We Our seniors had already developed the rocket, and which went up to an altitude of 15 kilometers. It was launched in May 2012, and since then we started working on this project. The whole aim of the project is to perform some scientific experiments at that altitude. I mean, one of the payloads we are working right now is an ozone sonde, which would be measuring concentration of ozone with altitude using the sounding rocket. So
Hmm.
a lot of good experiments can be performed at that altitude, and definitely a sounding rocket of that class would be a great. And of course, it's a good experience for students here who get to work on a project like that. So.
Hmm. I'm sure a lot of American students would be pretty jealous about you guys getting to work on such a interesting things like that. That does sound pretty fantastic. What sort of experiments would you guys be doing on that rocket?
We are in Trivandrum, and there's something very special about this place. It lies on the magnetic equator. One experiment we thought of was to just see how ions move in atmosphere at this place. I mean, they go vertically upwards, and then they follow a spherical trajectory towards the poles. So it's something very nice which happens here.
Hmm.
And then one idea was to actually use sounding rockets to measure concentration of pollutants to say altitude of 30-35 kilometers, which cannot be achieved using unmanned aerial vehicles. And then, as I told you, measuring concentration of ozone, and similarly, a lot of experiments actually. And I mean, someone suggested if you could reach an altitude of 100, you could actually do a lot of experiment in an ionospheric region, which would be pretty interesting. And apart from that, yes, we have of general health monitoring systems, of course. So, like, yes, so we have few concepts, but right now we are working only few of them, and in future maybe a lot of other students would work on different concepts, and we would be able to test them at that altitude. So,
It sounds really interesting. I mean, I wasn't aware that you guys are in a place where you guys can see, you can observe the ions in such a unique environment. That sounds very interesting.
yes.
Um, is the work you guys do there as students, how does that relate back to the Indian space program in a larger way?
I mean, most of work we do is under guidance of VSSC, Indian Space Research Organization,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy sitting next to me is actually working on developing a database for. I mean, basically, he's parameterizing the whole rocket and then generating a lot of data on that, which would be sort of used to complement the existing tools at ISRO. So these are one way. Above that, most of us would be eventually working for ISRO. So getting an experience on working a project like this will definitely help us in future when we go to ISRO and are assigned a project like this. It would be slightly easier for us to get used to working in that environment.
Obviously, yeah. I mean that makes a great deal of sense. Getting used to fiddling with rockets is going to make you better at working with rockets later, right? So, one element of space that often comes up in my conversations is the public perception of space and the public perception of space element. Um, as you may know, over here in the U.S. and in England, where I'm from originally, the public often says that they really like space, they're really interested in it, but they don't really want to fund it. No one's really interested in giving NASA any more money than they already have. I'm interested to hear what the Indian public thinks about India's space program. Is it similar to here, where people think that it's very cool and interesting, but they're not really interested in paying a lot of money for it, while there's still so many problems down here? Or is it something that people are more interested in spending money on?
Well, it's the same story everywhere. I mean, people love space. They want to talk about it. They want to know about it. But when it comes to spending money on space exploration, they often tend to shy away a bit. More or less, the story is same, but I would say it's still slightly better than compared to in US because. I mean, when we all think of NASA, it's only the only things which comes to our mind is space exploration. So people generally do not like to spend a lot of money on space exploration. But when it comes to ISRO, I mean that's how it's been. But ISRO has done most of the work, which has somehow led to helping people here. I mean, we haven't spent a lot on exploration really, apart from the Mars orbiter mission and the Chandrayaan mission. But so that's one reason, probably I would say the perception which people have here is not that bad. I mean, people still think okay that we are getting something out of it, and spending on it is. I mean, it's profitable in a way. I
Right,
mean,
right.
yes,
It's seen as more of a practical investment.
yes,
That's interesting to me, given that a lot of work that NASA does end up being practical and usable by the average person in America.
exactly, exactly.
But I suppose it's a case of
Exactly.
perception, right? If
It's a
I.
case of perception, and it's a case which comes out more often.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you can say maybe because of the media, which publicizes the exploration part of it more than it publicizes the practical aspects. Or so yeah, it's more about how people perceive it than
I mean, that's very interesting. It's that perception is always something that the space community is always facing down and talking about quite a bit. And one thing I did want to go over, we've talked about this a little bit with the manned missions and what have you, but what does India's space future look like? What do you guys, I mean, how far off do you think these manned flights are going to be? I know the world's pretty interested to see when India starts is going to start doing that. What do you guys think?
I mean, I feel we would have a manned flight for the next 15 years, definitely. And more importantly, when the way I see it, the most of the missions in future would be collaborative. And I've been following the news over some time. I mean, 2014, uh, the ex-ISRO chairman went to US, and India signed a deal with NASA where they would be developing a synthetic aperture radio telescope together, and uh, and have planned to do some collaborative work for Mars exploration. So that's the way I feel things should work, and that's the way they will in future. I mean, collaborative work is the future. So yes. So, look, India would definitely venture into some human space flight, space settlement in future, and it would be with other people, and that would actually probably end up accelerating the process here. I mean, it's definitely difficult for any organization in the world, I would say, to as fast as they can do when they are doing it together. So.
Yeah, I think that's something that you're seeing in a lot of different countries that are trying to go for space programs these days. You know, you see the ESA, where Europe works together as one instead of all the different countries having their own space programs. And they've obviously seen some really fantastic success. Not every country has the resources of the U.S. or the USSR, for example. Um,
Yes.
it's and space is expensive and space is difficult. And I think that you're right in that cooperation and collaboration is the way forward for all of these. Space collaboration is the way forward for a lot of these. You see this also in Africa, where various African nations are working together to, delve into space programs and space projects for themselves. I think it's a really interesting new approach to developing space. This cooperative drive to develop more space technology.
Another thing which I see in future happening in India is the coming up of new companies, private space startups in India. I mean, currently there's no space law in our country, but things are changing. We have few companies coming up, and that would be pretty interesting because having a private space company or private space organization definitely helps the government organization as well. I mean, it's not like other fields where the two organizations would be competing with each other. It's more like working together for a common goal. So I see that as one of the major things which should happen and would happen in India in next 10, 15 years. Private space companies, of course.
That's interesting actually. That leads into my next subject pretty cleanly. Over in the US, we're currently in the midst of what I'd consider somewhat of a slow revolution, in that most of the space development and space technology is not taken over by private companies yet, but certainly they're trying to do that. And private companies are getting much, much more involved with space every single day. A lot of the hopes of America's future space involvement sort of hinges on this hope that private companies are able to pick up NASA's work, almost wholesale. I was going to ask whether or not a similar thing is happening in India, but you've already helpfully answered that for me. I guess what I'd like to know is what sort of work are private companies in India currently doing?
I can actually tell you about a couple of companies. One is Team Indus, which is actually participating in Google Lunar X Prize.
Hmm.
So they plan to send a small rover on Moon, which has to, of course, complete the task, which is to move about 500 meters on Moon and send some data back on Earth. So they have already developed the rover and they have tested its soft landing. They actually won a milestone prize sometime back,
Wow.
and they plan to launch it next year. So that's one very promising company right now.
Hmm.
Then we have few other companies like Dhruva Space, which is working on developing satellites from 100 to 1000 kgs weight. So there are companies which are coming up, and Though the difficulty which all of them face is the non-existing space law in our country, but recently ISRO has announced that we are actually working on developing a space law in this country, and hopefully by end of next year the first draft of that will be out, and it will be discussed among different ministries, and probably very soon we'll have a space law which would actually facilitate a lot of other companies in this country, a lot of people who want to venture into space.
Hmm.
The way I see it, next 10 years, there would be a good handful of companies coming up doing really well and complementing, I would say, complementing the work at ISRO. So,
That's really quite something. It's interesting that you bring up space law, but this show sort of accidentally ended up being a space law podcast for about 6 months with as many lawyers as we had on. So I would be very interested to hear and see a little bit of the work that's come out of there in the next couple of months. I'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. So, with the private companies, are there any private companies managing things like developing launch vehicles for India yet? That's where most of the private companies here in the US are focusing their
well,
efforts on.
not yet, because the law right now does not allow any country to develop launch vehicles. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, there are companies which manufacture a component, and but I don't right now. There is no company which actually works on a launch vehicle as such. That's an area which could be really useful in future.
I wonder if there's many waiting in the wings for when those laws and changes go through. It'd be really
Yes.
interesting to see. So, given again that we're a space settlement podcast, it's often nice for us to go back to our roots a little bit. I was introduced to you guys by fantastic member of the NSS, who I'll leave unnamed for now, who tells me that you guys are working with them on developing some space habitat ideas and projects. You want to tell us a little bit about those?
Yes, well, it started last year around September. We had a Space Open conference where we talked to Mark. We came across Mark and a lot of other people from space industry. And one of the topics discussed there was how we can actually involve people from other fields if we ever plan to uh, develop a settlement outside Earth, because uh, it's not engineering. I mean, yes, of course it is engineering, but it's a bit more than that. If you have to live somewhere for a very long time, so I ended up writing a mail to Mark and saying that I think we should do something. Being in a space science institute, I feel it's a responsibility that we take some step and involve people from other fields, and at least make people aware. Say, for example, a design students, they don't really care about what's going on in space, which is not right, because at some time, I mean, if not today, maybe 30 years later, when we are planning for a space settlement, we would need their opinion, with
Mm-hmm.
their views on it. So why not now? So we came up with this concept and we started doing some groundwork. I reached out to a few architecture students in my country, I mean, across different colleges, and I got some really good response from people. Um they were interested. I mean, many of them were interested because it's space and they always wanted to do something here. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and many others were interested because it would be something very challenging for them. One of the students said that I'm an architect and I would love to design a habitat which challenges me, and nothing is more challenging than space.
That's
So
true.
that was the sort of, yes, uh, yes. So that was the sort of response we got from students, and we started developing it a bit more. Currently, then with the help of Mark, we could know about a lot of other people who are working in this field, like one of the professor at University of Honolulu, Lisa Lockhart. She has done a lot of work in space habitation. So, and we are still in a very conceptual stage. We are still developing the problem statement for it, and we are still talking to students and professors from architecture group, so that we get a feel of the problem statement that we need to develop to involve them, because uh, as an engineers, all that matters to us is that okay, we go to space, we survive there.
Mm-hmm.
uh, we cannot make a habitat in space feel like home. That's something up to an architect, or I mean, I would not say up to, but that's something they are uh, pr- uh, more trained to design. So design a
Right.
habitat for human needs.
Right.
So
Right. Yeah. I mean, this work between different fields and different different skill sets is becoming more and more of a big deal over here, and I think everywhere in the world who are aiming for space at some point in the future. We need to start acknowledging that there are these other skill sets that are valuable, very valuable to our space programs. Well, guys, it's been absolutely fantastic, riveting. It sounds like India is just primed to do all kinds of incredible things in the next coming years, and hopefully we'll see your two names popping up on some news broadcast soon about some interesting stuff you guys are up to.
thank you for that. We hope the same.
Thank you both for being on the show. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you guys and more about the work you're doing over there. And it's been great to have a different perspective on space and space settlement and everything else.
Definitely. Thank you so much for having us on the show.
Hey folks, hope you enjoyed the episode. Big shout out to John Boswell of Symphony of Science for making the music that you're currently listening to. Check him out at symphonyscience.com. And a huge shout out to Nick LaCrome, our $10 Patreon. If you want to support the show, you want to make sure we get really great guests, and you want to make sure we have all the equipment we need, and get a little something for yourself in the form of early episodes, monthly hangouts, and all kinds of crazy stuff, go to www.patreon.com/Voices from L5 or follow the link below in the box accompanying this website. Or if you just want to know a little bit about the show, go to Twitter and check us out at Voices from L5. One big shout out to the NSS. We are now an NSS sponsored podcast. Go to nss.org to learn more about this fantastic organization, one of the biggest civilian space organizations in the world, and also probably the biggest push for space settlement that exists. That's www.nss.org.